In my old town of Nebraska, we didn't have our own power plant in town, and we used to get our electricity from a big city down south. One day in 2002, I believe it was June, we had a big fire that got started when a truck rammed into a facility that distributes the electricity throughout our town. The truck was carrying some type of accelerant, and I heard the fire was unstoppable for a few hours. By the time the fire was put out, the electric facility was reduced to ashes, and the entire town had lost power. Initially, the experience was a lot of fun for the children. I was only 14 at the time, and it was a lot of fun going back to the Stone Ages for a couple of days. However, the fun didn't last. Water pressure became too low by day 2, and we couldn't take showers anymore. Not only that, we had to conserve water by not flushing the toilet for number once, and so the bathroom was really stinky. Another problem was that we were running low on batteries and candles. And when I say we, I mean the whole town. Everyone complained, the mayor continued to repeat that we get the power back on soon, but we still didn't have power on day 4. Around day 5, several families had left the town to stay with relatives and friends until the power was restored. Hundreds of people left the town, and many shops were closed. Our town looked more and more like an abandoned slum as the days went by. I believe it was after a week since losing the power when people openly began to talk about weird things happening around town. Before that, we did see some strange things, but we chalked it up to being scared from the whole town being in a blackout. As far as the strange things were concerned, they were generally people witnessing ghostly apparitions, but some have said they actually had physical contact with those beings. Me, for example, I thought I saw a girl walking in our front yard, and that was on the first day of the blackout. It wasn't the full shape of a girl walking either, but more like her outlines were highlighted, almost like looking at those crappy holograms in Electronic Expo and stuff. As the days went by, she looked clearer and clearer. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining the young girl, but she was actually there. Then eventually, the beings that we saw began to show signs of aggression. For example, I was in the bathroom peeing when I could feel something cold pressing on my thighs. At first, it was just a touch, but when I tried to get up, I could really feel it pushing down on me. Try as I may, I couldn't get up. I screamed for help, and Dad came running. He rammed the door with his shoulder, but it didn't even shake from the impact. Dad actually had to smash the door into pieces using his axe, and it was only when there was a huge hole in the door that the force let me go and I was able to get up. Later, when I was more calm, Dad told me that the door felt like a concrete when I tried to ram it. He said that it was unnatural and that there was something evil at play. More people began leaving the town, and by around day 10, I don't know the exact number, but it felt like half the population had left the town. From that point on, close neighbors stayed together in one house instead of living in separate homes. We tried to stay in groups of at least 2 people at all times, and we even went to the bathroom in pairs. We didn't care about the shame or even the smell. We were too terrified by that point. When we gathered in churches or in town hall, we saw people with scars and bruises on their body. They said it was all done by the ghosts. On day 13, Mr. Chamberlain came to the church to say a few words. He was a gentleman who kept to himself in the woods. He would come into town a few times a year to stock up on supplies and whatnot. We didn't really know him all that well, but for some reason, having him in the church felt very reassuring to all of us. He said these words, and please know that I'm paraphrasing. Man built fire to scare away the animals, but we've long forgotten that there was another reason for having fire in our homes. The spirits, ghosts, pick your word, they are drawn to the primitive world. The cities confuse them and scare them with all the lights and cacophony. The cities unknowingly shield its inhabitants from evil spirits. This town, even though small and with relatively low population, it was still too busy and not elemental enough for the spirits to freely roam the streets. That is, until the power went out for an extended period of time, and these things began to get bolder and bolder with each passing day. You are all ill-prepared to face what's coming. Simply having fire like our ancestors won't do. I suggest for all of you to leave town until the power's restored. Ask your mayor for honest answer and figure out when the power's coming back on. Don't come back until you're certain there's power. But if you are staying, stick together in large groups and have fire going in your homes at all times. Don't believe everything you see. Don't give those things the power to make you see what they want you to see. And that was it. He got up and left, even though people asked him questions and begged him to stay. Right after the speech, Dad took us all home and he made us pack. We loaded the car with everything in under an hour and we left town right away. 6 days later, we came back home only when we were certain that the town had the power back on, just like Mr. Chamberlain told us to do so. At the end of the whole ordeal, 2 people were missing and 1 person had gone totally insane. The missing persons were never found, and from what I gather, the lady who went insane hasn't recovered. We moved out of that town the next year, and none of us have returned since then. I live in a big city now because I'm too afraid to stay in smaller towns or remote places. I don't go camping, I don't like dark places, and I most definitely don't play with things like Ouija boards. My fiancé is the only person I told this story to, and thankfully, he's not the type to ridicule someone over an experience as incredulous as mine. My apartment's well lit, I've got a big backup battery system installed, and most of all, there's a fireplace that's always on standby. I may seem like I'm being paranoid, but believe me when I say this from experience, you don't want to be caught unprepared when the big solar flare event happens, and it'll happen too. It's only a matter of time. I had a best friend named Tommy when I was 4 years old. To tell you the truth, I don't much remember the times I spent with Tommy at that age. I just know that we were inseparable because my mom tells me so. I do of course remember the things that we did when we were 6 years old. Even then, we were still inseparable. I was bullied a lot when I was in 1st grade. Tommy was the only friend who would hang out with me, and he was the only one who would comfort me when I was down. Sadly though, Tommy couldn't go to school with me because he was sick. He had leukemia and his body wasn't strong enough for the rigors of school. Not after all the treatments he was receiving. The kids at school called me a freak, gypsy, and all kinds of mean things. I never had trouble making friends and getting along with other kids. I really couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong in school for everyone to treat me like that. I was 8 years old when Mom took me to a children's therapy. I was still bullied at school and my depression had gotten to the point that I nearly stopped eating. I spoke to Dr. Lee and things became clearer little by little. Apparently, I had been seeing him for 2 years already. For whatever reason, I would never remember my sessions with him once I returned home, and so our talks were always like our first. Dr. Lee told me that Tommy had passed away at the age of 5. He told me that I had made an imaginary friend out of Tommy, but that to me, he was as real as anything in this world. I've learned that the kids at school began to bully me when one of the kids saw me talking to the thin air in front of my house. I of course thought that I was talking to Tommy, but for the kid looking at me, I essentially looked like a complete lunatic. Mom tried to convince me for 2 years that Tommy was no longer alive, but I'd always forget what she said after a few hours. As I said, it was the same deal with Dr. Lee. At the age of 8, I had finally understood what was plaguing me, and I could also sustain the memory of that. I'm completely normal today. I've got a career, a girlfriend, and a few close-knit friends who I care for a lot. It took much persistence on my part to stop seeing Tommy, but with time, I was no longer able to see him even when I wanted. I do, however, have one thing that puzzles me till this day. I spoke to Tommy's mom several times while I was going through the sort of rehab. It was painful for her to speak to me, but she did anyway because she was deeply touched that I would miss her son that much. In some ways, it gave her comfort that aside from Tommy's family, there was another person alive who cared for him so much. So during our talks, I would surprise her with many details of Tommy's medications and the little happenings that only he and his mother would remember. There was no way that I could be aware of the types of medication Tommy was on since I never learned of anything relating to that. It was also impossible for me to know that Tommy had asked for a Coke just one day before he passed away. Tommy told me that he was really painful on one rainy night in the hospital. He said that a lightning had struck a car in the parking lot on that night. He told me how scared he was, but funny enough, all he could think about was having a can of Coke. I knew those details somehow, and I told Tommy's mom about them. I remember her crying and hugging me very closely. I only learned later in life, when I had gotten much older, that everything I had told her had actually happened. So as you can see, I still wonder if Tommy was real. If he wasn't imaginary and he was actually there with me in spirit. I remember blaming him for all my troubles when I was younger. But today, I just miss him a lot, and I've got no hard feelings. I think for him, this life was hard to let go. He needed my company before he could say goodbye forever, and I'm glad I was there for him. I feel at peace knowing that he's moved on to someplace better. I'm happy that I've got a friend waiting for me on the other side. My apartment's located in the middle of a big city, so for the most part, there are always people outside at all hours of the day. My neighborhood isn't really considered to be one of the better ones in the city, but it's not in a crime-ridden area either. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's just a so-so neighborhood. About a month ago, a homeless man began showing up near my apartment. He didn't bother anyone and just sat near the entrance, sometimes asking for change. I may sound cold when I say this, but I really didn't like seeing him there. I get off from work at 9 p.m. and seeing a homeless man by the entrance of my apartment isn't something that makes me feel safe. This is especially true for women, any woman really. With time though, I got used to seeing him, and since he didn't do anything stupid, I figured no harm, no foul. One night after work, I got called into the office by my manager. I didn't do anything wrong, but he was just giving me crap for his shortcomings as a manager. He does this sometimes. He picks one victim a month and takes out his frustration on them. I was in a foul mood, not only because I got yelled at for nothing, but also because I was coming home at 10 p.m. Getting off the bus at 9 p.m. is scary enough. I really didn't need the moron to hold me back for an hour. But anyhow, I get off the bus and I'm walking toward my apartment. It feels like someone's following me from behind, but I don't feel like turning around to check. It's because of this helpless feeling that you get when you feel like you're being followed. It makes you think, if you turn around and look, you may instigate the attack. But if you choose to not check and play a fool, then you may never see what's coming to you. As a woman, it seems like an impossible choice to make, because think about it. What if you do see the attack coming? Then what? What can you possibly do to fight off the attacker? So yeah, I continue walking, and it feels like a bad omen because the footsteps continue to follow me. I'm near the apartment, and tonight, I'm praying to God for the homeless man to be there. But as luck would have it, he's not there tonight. I open the door to the lobby, and right away feel someone shoving me from behind. I'm on the floor, and I can hardly move. I'm thinking, at best, I'm done, and at worst, you know exactly what's coming. That's when I hear a loud thud, and I feel the hands and knees off my back and arms. I roll on my back and see the homeless man fighting off my attacker. The attacker runs off, and I don't know what's gotten into me, but I jump in the arms of the homeless man and thank him. Seconds pass by, and the homeless man gently pushes me off him. "Oh my god, thank you. Thank you so much. You just saved my life tonight. Please tell me any way that I can help you." The homeless man smiles at me and says, "You don't have to thank me. I only saved you because this is not the way you're supposed to go. He almost messed it up for you. Your time will come. You just wait patiently." He turns around and leaves while I'm stunned from the attack, but even more so from what the homeless man just told me. I ran out after maybe 30 seconds, but it was long gone by then. Another scary thing is that the homeless man never showed up after that day. What he said to me, I can chalk it up to crazy talk if he had showed up again the next night. But he didn't. I haven't seen him anywhere near my apartment since then. So to that end, it begs the question, what did he mean by that not being the way I should go? And what about the part about my time coming? Because if it's coming, when is it coming? And how will it happen? There are 4 main participants in this experience. One is Clint, the boyfriend of Laura. Laura is of course one of the participants, and she happens to be the best friend of my girlfriend Kelly. The last one is me, and the story begins at a dock. I had gone out with Kelly for 2 months at this point in time, and I was introduced to Clint and Laura the week prior. Clint is quite wealthy, and he owns a yacht. At least I think it's a yacht, seeing as how it was over 50 feet long and the interior was simply magnificent. I mean, the damn thing's probably bigger than my apartment, and definitely more luxurious, that's for sure. But yeah, I was at the dock because Clint had invited me and Kelly to hang out on his yacht for the day. He told us he'd take us out to the ocean, and we happily obliged. We were on the deck of the bow, sipping martinis and whatnot. The ship was piloted by a captain and his crew. We were served drinks by the stewards, and damn, playing a millionaire for a day was a lot of fun. We were pretty far out by about 3 p.m. It had been roughly about an hour since we set anchor, and it was all water everywhere we saw. The first sign of trouble came to us as black clouds and the sky above us slowly darkening. There was no storm warning or even a forecast of light shower for today. But then again, you can't really believe the weather forecast 100%. The captain starts the engine and we are about to leave when really out of nowhere a dense fog envelops the entire vessel. What's even more worrisome is the fact that the engine is fluttering at the same time the fog descends upon us. Seconds later, the engine dies and the captain can't get it restarted. Then all of a sudden, we hear a really deep trumpet-like noise. It's hard to describe, but it's much grander and louder than anything you can imagine. Clint looks terrified, and my guess is that we all have the same look on our faces. But still, he tells us not to worry, then leaves us to speak to the captain. Kelly's shaking like a leaf as she clings to me. I try to control her shake, but in the process I learn that my hands are shaking just as badly. Laura walks right next to us, and I do my best to keep both of them calm. No more than 5 minutes after Clint had left us, the sky gets darker so fast that it seems like it's pitch black everywhere. Seriously, you can't tell me that it's daytime right now. The captain turns on all the lights on deck, but the fog is so dense that you can barely see a few feet ahead. Then the sound of the trumpet is heard again. But this time, we can feel the deck trembling violently. Clint returns to us soon after, and it takes us inside into the cabin area. I ask him what the captain had to say about it, and he tells me to give him some time to figure things out. My opinion is that this isn't something one can simply figure out, and so I sternly ask again, "Clint, what did the captain say to you? We need honest answers, man." Okay, I'm sorry. You should know the truth. Unfortunately, he hasn't got a clue. My ship's maintained immaculately, and it was in perfect condition when we set sail this morning. This shouldn't have happened. The engine shouldn't be failing on us like this. Clint then takes us to the bridge, and right off the bat, we can see that every single one of the crew members are in a state of shock. The captain looks somewhat calmer, but the sweats on his forehead say otherwise. I get closer to the captain, but just enough so I don't bother him. What I notice is that all the navigational devices look to be in complete disarray. I may not be a sailor, but I'm not blind. I can clearly see all the screens flickering and tearing. It's similar to the effect a magnet has on a CRT screen. A terrifying minute passes when the ship tilts about half a meter from the bow. Soon, the natural buoyancy rights the ship, but then we feel another tilt, and this time it's greater than the last one. Then bam! The bow of the ship tilts to what seems like an impossible angle, and the anchor chain breaks off, creating sparks and thunderous noises on deck. Something was definitely pulling on the anchor line. Now mind you, the anchor line is made of chains. I don't know the specification for the breaking point of such chain, but you have to figure it could withstand tremendous amount of stress to anchor a 50-footer. Then before we even have the chance to get over the shock of losing the anchor, the boat begins listing from one side to the other. This doesn't feel natural at all. It isn't the wave that's creating the motion, and you can feel that it's something much more powerful and direct. We are freaking out with some people screaming and crying. Then suddenly the captain gets the ship started, but it struggles to propel forward. I don't know what exactly he's doing, but my guess is that he's trying to go forward and backward repeatedly to get the ship unstuck in a matter of speaking. Maybe some 20 seconds into the whole ordeal, I can hear the ship's hull being stressed. It's akin to having some force pulling it down into the ocean. It almost feels like the ship's about to snap in half, but we hear a loud splash outside of the ship, and it begins moving forward. The captain seems to have put the ship to go full speed, and we continue to move forward through the dense fog. Minutes later, the fog dissipates all around us. It happens nearly instantly, and we all shade our eyes using our hands because somehow we have daylight again. We didn't talk much on our way back to the dock. Once there, Kelly and I got off the ship right away and drove away from the dock as quickly as possible. We caught up with Clint and Laura a few weeks thereafter, and when I asked him what had exactly happened on the day in question, he told me he genuinely couldn't give me a reasonable explanation. In fact, even the captain couldn't explain what exactly happened on that day. But you know, we all came out of it okay, and therefore, I'm fine with the mystery of the whole ordeal. Kelly and I are still together, and in fact, we are getting married soon. There was a time when Kelly used to fantasize about getting wedded on a ship, but today we get scared just looking at the ocean. I think it's safe to say that a cruise won't be one of our options when it comes to honeymoon or any other occasion for that matter. I am never going out into the ocean again, ever. Road Trip 2005. Me, my girlfriend, and my friends Josh and Kenny were driving on an endless stretch of road in Arizona. We had another 2 hours of drive to get to our destination, but my friend Kenny had this bright idea that we should make a brief stop on the way. He told us that he's never been to one of those really small towns like in the movies, and that he wanted to experience one firsthand. We were on a stretch of highway that was void of civilization. If Kenny was going to make his dream come true, then this would be the best place to make it happen. We drive for another half an hour and voila! There's an exit that seems to lead to a single lane road. We get off the exit and drive for what may have been another 2 minutes when our surroundings change dramatically. To be more specific, all we saw during the 2 minutes of drive were dead trees and dirt as far as the eyes can see. but now all of a sudden the trees are green and we are surrounded by lush vegetation. Weird for sure, but we continue driving because we can see a small town up ahead. The town's about 2-block radius in size, and surprisingly, it's exceptionally clean. Everything here looks vintage, but their conditions look brand new. We get out of the car, and the first thing that we notice is how eerily quiet the place is. You have to understand, before this moment, we were inside a car with the AC on and the music blasting. There was no way for us to be aware of the ambient sound, and thus the surprise. John breaks the ice as he says, "I'm hungry, let's do lunch." He makes a good point. We had peaches for breakfast, and the time's already 2 p.m. We have to eat something. So we walk inside the only diner in town, and like everywhere else, it's empty. Kenny says, "Take a seat, it's a slow town, give it a minute." This place feels like one of those model houses. If you ever been to one, then you know everything inside a model house is fake. The books on the bookshelf, the fruits in the kitchen, the decoration plants, and even some of the furniture, they are all fake, all plastic. The only difference with this place is that everything here is real. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but that's the vibe this place gives off. It may have something to do with the lack of human beings being present, but nonetheless, everything feels so artificial. You know, fake. So we sit there for close to 10 minutes, and then I tell the guys, "Do you guys think maybe this town's been built to be served as a museum of sort?" "I don't know, man, but it's creeping me the hell out. What do you say we get the heck out of here?" Kenny responds. We all agree, then step out of the diner and proceed to get in our car. We drive on the same road, but in the opposite direction, of course, to get back on the highway. It should take us about 2 minutes to reach the on-ramp, but we are still on the same road 10 minutes later. I stop the car and ask, "Hey, did we miss the highway?" My girlfriend goes, "No, how could we miss it? It's all road here. There's no landmark or anything that obstructs the view. We couldn't have missed it, but must have according to the distance we must have driven so far. It doesn't make any sense. Should I turn the car around and go back?" I ask, and the guys agree. So we make a U-turn and go in the opposite direction for close to 20 minutes. At this point, not only should we have seen the on-ramp to the highway, but we should have also gone past the town we stopped by only half an hour ago. I stop the car, all of us get out, and look around our surroundings for any signs of life or landmark. There's nothing. It's just this road, lots of green trees, and the haunting silence that creeps us all out. I ask the guys, "What do you think we should do?" "Not much else we can do, man. We turn the car around and continue driving," Kenny responds. I make eye contact with each person and say, "Everyone agreed?" They all nod, and we do as Kenny proposed. We drive for another 200 miles when we come across an old building. We are about to run out of gas, and the guys suggest that we should take a rest. We park the car right next to the building, shading it from the sun. It doesn't take too long for all of us to fall asleep. I don't know how long we must have slept, and I'll answer why shortly, but we wake up to an unfamiliar sight. The building that we were parked right next to is no longer there. Instead, we are parked on the side of an old dirt road, and all the green trees that were so aplenty can no longer be seen. We are all kinda creeped out, but we try to stay calm to the best that we can. We talk about our situation, especially concerning the low fuel, and we come to an agreement that we should drive in the same direction that we've been driving before making this stop. We do, and sometime later, we see a parkway that we can get on. We get on the parkway and we are soon greeted by the sound of the low fuel warning. Luckily for us, we get to a gas station before the tank is empty, and this time the gas station had people in it. We fueled up, finished the rest of the trip, and all of us came back home safely. It's still a mystery to me what happened on that day, and the biggest mystery was, in a sense, the flow of time. Because here's the thing, when we got off the parkway and found the gas station, the time should have been at least 8 p.m. If you do the math, we arrived at the sleepy town at 2 p.m. and stayed there for about 20 minutes. Then we spent another 5 hours driving and stopping to talk things over. Finally, we stopped at the abandoned building and slept right next to it for a few hours. So then how does it make sense that we had arrived at the gas station at 2 p.m. on the same day? The sleepy little town was mysterious, yes, but you can explain the lack of people with dozens of different potential reasons. What about the missing time though? How does one explain that? Especially when it happened to multiple people. That's a tough one to disregard as delusion or imagination. I've always enjoyed the stories about the glitch in the Matrix or the missing time theories, but the truth is I've never believed in those things. After my experience, however, I have to say that I'm far more open to the idea that there may be many things in this world that are yet to be explained by mainstream science. Be that as it may, I can't draw any conclusion to my own experience, and so I think I'll leave it at that. I'm a big fan of the horror genre, and I'm sure all of your subscribers are as well. I mean, it's obvious, right? Now that we have that settled, I don't think I'll have to go into the whole detail about this forest where people go missing and never come back. You know, the usual suspects being a skinwalker, aliens, and whatnot. Because we too have one of those forests located not too far from our town. It comes with its own unique story, which again is your dime a dozen story about mysterious creatures eating people and stuff. I don't think anyone seriously believed those stories, especially because there were so many variations of it. But it's just one of those stories that got passed down, exaggerated, and reinvented over the past half-century. Children scare each other with them, adults laugh about them, you know the drill. Don't get me wrong, we have missing people every so often, but they are generally visitors from out of town who are presumed to have gotten lost. We have had a few people go missing who are from our town, but in those woods, there are so many things that can kill you that you don't really need to drag spirits and other similar nonsense to explain the disappearances. You folks in the city have no idea how dangerous a vast, wild forest can be to even the most experienced hunters and pathfinders. Look at it this way, you don't need a monster to get you offed without anyone knowing. You simply had to consume the wrong fruit, vegetable, or plant for you to get so sick that you can barely move, or to be so disoriented that you couldn't find your way back to civilization. It's really that simple. Having said that, I'd have to say that I wasn't particularly a smart kid in my early 20s. I had opportunities to become a mechanic, and I could have worked at my uncle's assembly plant, but I pushed aside the better choices and became a guide. A forest guide, if you may. I knew the forest pretty well, and I didn't want anyone bossing me around. I thought I was going to be my own boss and make loads of cash. Reality, though, has a way of knocking you in the head with a little dose of axiom. If one could become rich by merely giving tours to some random visitors, half the South would be filled with millionaires. So as it turned out, I was still bossed around by my employees, and by that I mean the tourists, and also failed to make loads of cash. One day though, and this was about 2 years after I began working as a guide, there was this group of filmmakers. I mean, I say that, but they were more like kids who thought they were making a documentary. But anyway, they wanted to hire me as their guide for making their film, Wink Wink the Blair Witch. 2 other guides were already on the job, and I was the only one left. That meant I could charge them more than the usual fee. Long story short, they needed me for 5 days and I was promised $1,000, which half of it I got paid up front. The kids were making a documentary about the people who went missing out in the woods. They weren't looking into Bigfoots and whatnot. Their suspicion was that there was an underground network of psychos that went around kidnapping people within the United States National Forest. There were in total of 7 sites they wanted to go to, and I knew all of them except one. Not that they knew that, since I lied to them that I knew them all. So on day 1, we get to the first site and the kids get all excited. They get the cameras out, start taking pictures, and doing an intro for their film. They also examined the nearby area for hours, which was kind of pointless because there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found. We set up camp there and spent the night. Morning came and we moved on to the second site. The kids got even more excited this time because there were signs that someone had been there recently. But if you ask me, it's a popular campsite. Of course there would have been someone here during peak season, which is now. But I let them have their fun, and another day passes with them filming and stuff. So now we are on day 3 and at site number 3. This is where things start to get exciting for real. Maybe exciting isn't the right word to describe the situation, but it's befitting to the way the kids were acting. You see, the campsite left a clue that it had been occupied recently. The tent, icebox, and the sleeping bags were all burned to ashes, but there was one thing that survived the fire. It was a paper, a newspaper. It was the most flammable thing among the items in the pile, but that one piece of newspaper somehow survived. The key thing about the paper was the date printed on it. It had been purchased only 6 days ago. An individual, or perhaps several people, were camping right here, but for some odd reason, they burnt down their entire belonging and presumably disappeared into the woods. I gotta say, I got a little tingling on my butt as well. Not a nice one though. It was just one of those really dark and ominous feelings that you get when you witness something truly perplexing. Honestly, I wanted to take the kids back into town, but I really needed that 1,000 bucks. So we stayed and I let the kids do their thing while I went around looking for the signs of the people who should have been here. When darkness fell and we gathered around the campfire, I told the kids that we should go back into town the first thing in the morning. They asked why and I gave them an honest answer. The thing is, I had checked the number of canteens, cups, and utensils, the things made of metal that couldn't burn down. Based on my findings, I was able to deduce that there were at least 3 people in this camp. Now, I could understand setting your stuff on fire by mistake, but the aftermath of the fire that we saw, there were clear signs that it was a controlled burn. In other words, everything was neatly placed in a pile before the fire was set. It was deliberately done to make sure nothing else would catch on fire. This is the way we burn things in the woods so we don't start a huge forest fire. I can't say what led to such drastic actions, but it couldn't have been anything good. The best thing that we could do was to go back, report it to the rangers, and let them figure things out. Unfortunately though, the director kid was too stubborn for his own good. Some kids wanted to go back with me, but he refused. So then when he refused, even the kids who wanted to go back changed their minds. I thought about leaving them all on their own, but when morning came, I got soft and continued to guide them through the woods. We got to the 4th and 5th site without a hitch, but we hit a little snag on the 4th night. One of the kids sprained an ankle and he could barely stand, let alone walk. We could help him walk and try to go back into town, but I knew that would only make his ankle worse. I told them we should stay an extra day at the camp and give the ankle some time to heal. We all fell asleep around the same time that night, and when the sun rose, the ankle kid was gone. He couldn't have walked off alone with that ankle, and I would have woken up if an animal took him. But I'm telling you, the night was quiet as ever. Someone must have taken him, and this someone did it so quietly that none of us could hear. It was time to go, and I told the kids that it was the right thing to do. Imagine babysitting 4 kids running frantically to look for their friends. It was a recipe for disaster. I would lose more of them and have a lot to answer to the authorities. But the director kid, that stubborn kid, he wouldn't listen. He took off to one direction and directed another kid to go to another direction. I told them to stop, but they refused to even acknowledge that I was speaking to them. The 2 girls stayed with me, and I told them to stay put while I ran off to bring back the director kid. I ran toward the general direction the kid went to, but after walking some minutes, I began to realize that I was losing my bearing. I had to save the ones that I could still save. I had to go back to the girls. Luckily for them, I had found them. I told them we would wait for their friends for a couple of hours, but that we were leaving if they didn't come back within that time. It was better for us to go back into town and bring help. 2 hours passed and the kids didn't come back. I told the girls to pack up and left the camp right away. I wanted to go get help as quickly as possible, but the girls were unfit, to put it kindly, and it didn't seem like we'd make it back in town before nightfall. We made it halfway back by the time it was too dark to continue walking. Earlier in the day, I told the girls to stay put and let me go get help, but one of the girls cried hysterically and I couldn't go on my own. We had to set up camp for the night to continue in the morning. That night, as the girls fell asleep, I continued to keep watch and didn't let anything slip past me. I had my rifle ready to go and calmly observed my surroundings. We were being watched, and there were at least 2 people in the outskirts of the campsite. As far as I was concerned, they were waiting for an opportunity to strike, waiting for that one slip-up of mine, hoping to wear me down both mentally and physically. They were waiting for me to start nodding off. It was hard staying up like that the whole night. No one to talk to keep me awake. Not being able to see our stalkers, it was really draining me down and I almost fell asleep a couple of times. Fortunately for all of us, morning came and we were still alive. We went back into town and spoke to the rangers right away. About 24 police officers joined the search by day 2, and we thoroughly combed through the forest. Lamentably, there was no sign of the 3 young men. We continued to search for a week, but we couldn't find a single thing that belonged to the kids. It didn't make any sense. 3 people went missing and they were all adults. Not only should you have a good chance to find someone alive, but you would at least find the bodies or their belongings if something had happened to them. But there was nothing. It was as if they were picked off one by one by some giant crane in the sky. On the last day of the search, I told one of the rangers about the night I spent with the 2 girls. I told him that we were being watched by multiple people and that my hunch was that the kids were taken by them. He didn't say anything back to me and began walking away. But after taking a few steps, he turned around to look at me and said, "This forest take those steady ones, and once you belong to it, you ain't never coming back. Can't you see it, kid? This is what we do as protocol and nothing more. We ain't never gonna find them. Go back home and never come back into these woods. It wanted you once, it'll take you if you give it another chance." He continued walking, got in his car, and I was left there stunned at what he had just told me. I stopped working as a guide after the experience. I asked my uncle for a job and I work at his assembly plant even till this day. In this world, there are worse monsters than Bigfoots and skinwalkers. I believe those monsters are people who decided to become animals, and some of them go unnoticed out in the woods. In America, there are still many places where the roads are rarely traveled. There are places where one can easily disappear if he or she wished. With 300 million plus population, can you imagine how many crazes our national parks can harbor? It's something that I think about quite often, and I do the smart thing by keeping myself out of them. Hey guys, Dennis here. I didn't disappear, but I was really sick in the past few days. I'm still sick, but I've done my best with the narrations. I hope that it was good enough and that you guys have enjoyed the video, especially because it's extra long, if you know what I mean. You know, the duration. Oh, you guys with the sick minds. Anywho, I'll talk to you guys in the comment section. Goodbye for now.